The stars had always been silent watchers. They carried the stories of countless species, of victories and defeats, of beginnings and endings. Some of these stories were carved in history, repeated by scholars and leaders. Others were left to fade, buried in the dust of time. The Loranthi people believed their story would remain quiet forever, for they had never been warriors or conquerors. They had only been caretakers, farmers, healers, and wanderers of the smaller lanes of space. Yet one moment, one act of compassion, would change how history remembered them. It began many centuries ago, when humanity was still young among the stars. Humans had just begun to stretch their hands into the galaxy, curious and stubborn. Their technology was improving, but it was not yet equal to the great empires. Their ships were fragile, their maps incomplete, and their presence in the galactic stage almost invisible. Most alien species who saw them thought they would rise for a short time, then vanish like sparks in the wind. One small human exploration ship, the Dauntless, proved just how fragile early humanity was. It had been sent far beyond safe borders, chasing whispers of resources and uncharted systems. The crew numbered less than 50, but each of them carried the burning spirit that had always defined humans. They were explorers, adventurers, and dreamers. But dreams do not protect against the cold cruelty of space. When their engines failed in an unknown sector, the Dauntless became a drifting coffin. Their communication systems were too weak to call home, and their supplies began to shrink. Days turned to weeks and hope dimmed. The crew's voices grew quiet, their strength fading. They believed no one would ever find them and that their story would end in the empty dark. It was then that the Loranthi appeared. The Loranthi were not powerful, nor wealthy. Their ships were not built for war but for travel and trade. They were known to be kind but timid, always avoiding conflict. When their survey ship detected the weak distress signal of the Dauntless, many on board hesitated. To aid a stranger in deep space could invite trouble. Yet the captain of the Loranthi vessel, a thoughtful elder named Cirilla, made a choice. She ordered her crew to set course for the human signal. The Loranthi expected to find wreckage. Instead, they found a small broken ship still clinging to life. They boarded with caution, their soft, scaled forms moving through the silent halls of the Dauntless. Inside, they discovered humans lying weak from hunger and thirst, yet still alive. The Loranthi gave them water, they gave them food, and most importantly, they gave them hope. For weeks, the Loranthi ship remained with the humans. They repaired damaged engines, patched hulls, and shared what little medical care they had. The Loranthi were not doctors of human biology, but their gentle efforts saved lives. Slowly, the Dauntless came back to life piece by piece. The humans, though weak, never forgot. Each act of kindness was carved deep into their hearts. They spoke often of their gratitude, promising that one day their people would remember this gift. The Loranthi, humble as always, dismissed these words. To them it was natural to help a stranger. They did not expect thanks. They did not expect memory. When the Dauntless was finally able to fly again, the two crews parted ways. The Loranthi disappeared into their quiet sector, while the humans began their long journey home. Yet before they left, the human captain, Adrian Holt, took Cirilla's hand and made a vow. Your kindness will not be forgotten. Humanity remembers, always. The Loranthi smiled, thinking it was nothing more than words said in the moment. For them, it was just another passing encounter in the endless waves of time. But humanity did not forget. Centuries passed. The galaxy shifted and changed. Empires rose, fell, and rose again. Wars scarred worlds, treaties healed them, and discoveries reshaped everything. Humanity did not fade as many had predicted. Instead, they grew stronger with every decade. They spread across stars, building colonies, fleets, and alliances. Their technology leaped forward, driven by curiosity and the old stubborn will that had carried them through countless hardships. And through it all, their archives remained. In vast libraries on Earth, on Mars, on countless colonies, the record of the Dauntless and the Loranthi's aid was preserved. Generations of humans read the tale. To some, it was history. To others, it was legend. For many, it became a lesson taught in academies and homes alike. Never forget kindness. Repay it when the chance comes. Children grew up hearing the story of the gentle Loranthi. Cadets trained with it as part of their oath. Commanders spoke of it when reminding soldiers what humanity fought for. And so the seed planted long ago grew into something far greater than the Loranthi could ever imagine. The Loranthi themselves, meanwhile, faded into obscurity. Their population remained small, their ships modest. They never sought war, never sought power. To the galaxy, they were background noise, soft voices drowned out by louder neighbors. Few remembered their name. Few cared for their survival, but humanity remembered. Humanity carried their name like a quiet star in the sky, waiting for the day it mattered again. On the Loranthi homeworld of Seralis, life was calm. The Loranthi tilled their lands, studied the skies, and told stories to their young of ancient travelers. Their leaders sat in simple councils deciding matters of farming and trade. They never built mighty fleets. They never raised armies. They trusted that by avoiding conflict they would endure. What they did not know was that shadows were gathering beyond their borders. The Varrock Dominion, a ruthless empire that valued strength above all, had begun expanding into Loranthi space. The Varrock saw them as weak, easy prey. To the Varrock, conquering the Loranthi would be effortless, a message to all others of their growing power. The Loranthi Council worried but hoped to negotiate. They sent envoys with gifts. They offered trade, resources, and peace. But the Varrock laughed. To them, Loranthi weakness was an insult. The storm had begun, and the Loranthi could not stop it. Far away, in human space, whispers of the Loranthi reached the ears of historians and archivists. The name sparked recognition. Files were opened, records studied. The tale of the Dauntless was spoken once again in high councils. And for humanity, the message was clear. The Loranthi had saved them once when humanity was weak and small. Now the Loranthi were in danger, and humanity was no longer weak. The vow made centuries ago stirred in human hearts. Adrian Holt's words echoed like thunder across the stars. Your kindness will not be forgotten. Humanity remembers. Always. And in the silence before the storm, fleets began to move. This was how it began. With a simple act of kindness, forgotten by one side but never erased from the memory of the other. The Loranthi believed their story would fade. They did not yet know that humanity was preparing to repay them, and when humans repaid a debt, whether of vengeance or gratitude, the galaxy always felt the shock. This was only the beginning. The Loranthi people had always believed that peace could protect them. They had no vast fleets, no armies that could darken the skies. Their ships were built for farming, trade, and study. Their leaders taught that conflict only created wounds that never healed. For many generations, this belief seemed to work. The Loranthi lived quietly on their homeworld in scattered colonies, watching the storms of war pass far beyond their borders. But the galaxy never stayed quiet for long. The Varrock Dominion was a rising power in the sector. Where the Loranthi built farms and schools, the Varrock built warships. Where the Loranthi studied stars, the Varrock studied conquest. The Varrock were fierce and proud, believing strength was the only law. To them, weak species existed only to serve or vanish. The Dominion had already consumed several small nations, and now their eyes turned toward the Loranthi. The Loranthi Council received the first warning as a blunt transmission. A Varrock warlord appeared on their screens, his heavy armor gleaming, his voice deep with scorn. Submit, he growled, and your people will survive under our rule. Resist and your worlds will burn. The council chamber fell into silence. The Loranthi had never faced such direct aggression. Some argued they should surrender at once to save lives. Others begged to send envoys with gifts and promises of peace. In the end, they chose diplomacy. They believed kindness could soften even the hardest hearts. It was a mistake. The Varrock envoy ships arrived not to negotiate but to measure. They scanned the Loranthi defenses, laughed at their outdated ships, and carried back the report that the Loranthi were no threat at all. Soon after, the Dominion's fleets came, massive cruisers, carriers bristling with weapons, and legions of soldiers eager for conquest. The Loranthi defense was shattered in the first battle. Their few patrol vessels were torn apart in hours. Colonies screamed for help as Varrock warships descended. Villages were destroyed, and orbital stations fell like sparks into the atmosphere. The Loranthi, gentle and unprepared, had no answer. On the homeworld of Seralis, panic spread. Families fled to the countryside. Leaders debated night and day, desperate for a solution. They sent messages to neighboring powers begging for aid. We offer food, medicine, trade. We will share everything we have. Only help us, but no one came. The surrounding empires saw the Loranthi as unimportant. Helping them meant risking war with the Dominion, and few were willing to make that sacrifice. Some even mocked them in secret, whispering, "The Loranthi never built strength. Now they will pay the price." For the Loranthi, despair settled like a heavy shadow. Their world grew quiet in the nights, broken only by the cries of refugees. In their fields, farmers no longer sang. In their cities, markets closed. The people whispered to one another that the end was coming. Elder Cirilla, long retired from her voyages, watched all this with sorrow. She was the same captain who, centuries earlier, had saved the stranded human ship, the Dauntless. She was old now, her scales pale, her body weak, yet her mind was sharp. She remembered the humans, their fragile lives, their burning determination. She remembered the words of their captain. "Your kindness will not be forgotten. Humanity remembers. Always." When she spoke of this memory to the council, many dismissed it. "Humans are far away," one counselor said. "Even if they remember, why would they risk their fleets for us?" "Stories cannot save us," another added. "We need real allies, not myths." Cirilla only shook her head. She believed in her heart that humanity was different. But even her faith wavered when the Dominion pressed harder. The Varrock warlord in charge of the invasion was named Kraval. He enjoyed cruelty. To him, the Loranthi were insects to be crushed. Each victory only fed his pride. He sent messages across the stars, mocking the Loranthi for their weakness. "You had your chance to kneel," Kraval declared in a broadcast that was forced onto every Loranthi channel. "Now your suffering will be our lesson to others. The galaxy will know what happens to those who stand in the way of the Dominion." His words broke the spirit of many. Loranthi families gathered their children and whispered final goodbyes, believing they would soon be lost. Entire villages prepared to surrender, hoping mercy might be granted, but mercy was not in the Varrock heart. Meanwhile, far from Seralis, the Loranthi distress signals traveled through deep space. Most who received them ignored them. A few traitors shook their heads sadly and deleted the messages. But one set of ears listened and remembered. On a human colony world called Novaterra, an archivist named Ilara was reviewing signals for historical study. She found the Loranthi call for help. At first, she thought little of it until she saw the name Seralis. The name struck her memory. She searched the archives and found it. The record of the Dauntless, the story taught to generations of humans. Her hands trembled as she sent the message up the chain of command. Within days, it reached the Human Council, and within hours after that, the order was given. Investigate, prepare, and if the Loranthi are under threat, intervene. Back on Seralis, the Loranthi continued to resist in small, desperate ways. Farmers armed themselves with old rifles. Scientists turned research vessels into clumsy defense ships. Children carried supplies to shelters. But nothing could stop the Dominion. The Varrock prepared for their final strike against the Loranthi homeworld. Massive fleets gathered above Seralis, their shadows darkening the skies. Kraval himself prepared to land, eager to claim the final victory. The Loranthi Council gathered one last time. Their voices were heavy with sorrow. "We have done all we can," one elder said. "Perhaps surrender is the only choice left," another whispered. Cirilla sat in silence, her heart heavy. That night she walked outside the city and looked up at the stars. Her eyes, clouded with age, searched for something she could not name. She whispered softly to the sky, "Humans, if your promise was true, if you really remember, we need you now." Her words drifted into the cold air, unheard by any around her, but across the stars her hope was not in vain. For even as she spoke, humanity's fleets were already preparing to cross the void. The days that followed were filled with dread for the Loranthi. Refugees crowded into shelters beneath the mountains. Families clutched each other tightly. Soldiers, too few and too poorly equipped, stood in hopeless defense lines. Above, the Varrock warships spread across orbit like a swarm of predators. Kraval's flagship loomed largest of all, its guns glowing with power. The Loranthi believed this was their final hour. They whispered to each other that soon Seralis would be nothing but ashes. Children cried in fear. Elders prayed for peace and death. The shadow of despair had fallen fully, and yet even in that darkness the seeds of hope had begun to stir, because humanity had heard. Humanity was coming, but the Loranthi did not know it yet. To them the sky was only filled with enemies. The thought that another fleet, one that remembered, one that carried gratitude instead of cruelty, might be on its way was too impossible to believe. For now, they braced for the end, and in doing so they stood at the edge of a story that would shake the stars. The skies of Seralis burned with the red glow of Varrock ships. They circled the Loranthi homeworld like vultures over prey, their weapons charged, their soldiers eager. From the mountains to the seas, every Loranthi heart trembled with fear. The Council had no more plans, no more defenses. The end felt certain. Above, the largest ship of all, Warlord Kraval's flagship, cast its shadow across the capital city. Its dark shape blotted out the stars. Kraval prepared to descend with his legions, ready to crush the last resistance and carve his victory into history. His voice boomed across every Loranthi channel. "Your time is over. The Dominion takes what it wants, and none can stop us. This world belongs to me now." The Loranthi people wept. They held each other close, waiting for fire to fall from the sky. But then something strange happened. Sensors on both Loranthi and Varrock ships began to detect ripples in space. A distortion. A disturbance in the quiet rhythm of hyperspace. At first the Varrock commanders ignored it, thinking it was debris or background interference. But the signal grew stronger, larger. Whole fleets of something massive were coming through. Moments later, the stars split open. Dozens of human ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Carriers, battleships, cruisers, and destroyers. More vessels than the Loranthi had ever seen in one place. Their hulls gleamed silver and blue, marked with the emblem of the United Human Fleet. The sudden arrival shook the heavens. On the ground, Loranthi citizens stared upward in shock. They had never seen such power. For a moment, they did not even understand what they were looking at. But then the human signal broadcasted across all frequencies, clear and strong. "We remember what you did for us. Now it is our turn." The words echoed across the planet. Families who had been preparing for death froze in disbelief. Soldiers on the ground, weary and broken, raised their heads with hope shining in their eyes. And in the council chamber, Elder Cirilla let tears stream down her scaled cheeks. "They came," she whispered. They truly remembered. The Varrock, however, were not moved by gratitude. They were enraged. Kraval snarled when he saw the human fleet. "Humans?" he growled. "This is not their war. They dare to interfere with Dominion conquest? Destroy them." Varrock ships shifted formation, preparing to engage, but the humans were faster. With perfect coordination, the United Human Fleet deployed its squadrons. Fighters streaked from carriers, leaving trails of light behind them. Human destroyers formed shields in front of Loranthi cities, their weapons glowing with deadly fire. Massive battleships targeted Varrock cruisers with precision strikes. The sky erupted into war. From the ground, the Loranthi watched the impossible unfold. For every Varrock attack, the humans answered with twice the strength. Human pilots darted through enemy fire, weaving like hunters in the dark. Human cruisers shielded Loranthi transports, absorbing blasts that would have destroyed them. One Loranthi child clung to his mother as they watched from the fields. Above, a human battleship placed itself directly in the path of Varrock bombardment. Explosions ripped across its hull, yet it held firm, refusing to allow a single shot to reach the city below. "Why?" the child asked. "Why would they do this for us?" His mother's voice shook, but she answered, "Because long ago we helped them, and they did not forget." Inside the command deck of the human flagship Resolute Dawn, Admiral Elias Morgan stood with steady eyes. He was an older man, his hair silver, his face marked by the years of many campaigns. But his voice was strong, filled with unshakable conviction. "Target Kraval's flagship," Morgan ordered. "Form defensive lines around the Loranthi cities. No Dominion soldier sets foot on this world while we stand." "Yes, Admiral," his officers replied. The humans did not come for conquest. They came for repayment. Every ship, every soldier, every pilot knew the story of the Dauntless and the kindness of the Loranthi. And they were determined to honor that memory. The Varrock were fierce fighters, but they had not expected resistance on this scale. Their fleet had been prepared for an easy victory against a defenseless people. Now they faced a human armada that fought with both skill and fury. Kraval roared in anger as his ships began to fall. "These humans will regret their arrogance. Push forward. Show them the might of the Dominion." His commanders obeyed, but doubt was spreading. Human strategies were unpredictable. Their fleets moved with strange coordination, using speed and sacrifice in ways the Varrock did not understand. They seemed willing to risk everything, not for gain, but for loyalty. It unsettled the Dominion. On the Loranthi surface, small groups of human soldiers landed alongside their allies. They helped guide civilians to shelters, set up defensive lines, and shared supplies freely. Loranthi children touched the armored hands of human soldiers with awe. Many could not believe such powerful beings treated them with care and respect. A young Loranthi named Kira approached one human soldier, her eyes wide. "Why do you help us? You do not even know us." The soldier, a woman with a calm smile, knelt down to meet her gaze. "Because your people helped mine long ago, and humans never forget." Kira's heart filled with warmth. For the first time, she felt that maybe her people had a future. The battle raged for hours. Explosions painted the night sky. Ships fell burning through the atmosphere, scattering wreckage across deserts and seas. But slowly, steadily, the humans gained ground. Their fleet pushed the Varuk back, forcing them out of orbit. Kraval's fury reached its peak. His massive flagship charged directly into the human lines, guns blazing. He wanted to crush them personally to prove the Dominion's strength. Admiral Morgan met the challenge. The resolute Dawn clashed with Kraval's flagship in a duel that lit up the heavens. Human and Vark firepower tore at each other, shaking space itself. On Seralis, Loranthi citizens stood outside their shelters, watching the battle with wide eyes. They did not see hopelessness anymore. They saw a fight for their survival, and humanity standing at their side. At last, the human fleet broke through Kraval's defenses. A swarm of fighters disabled his engines. Human cannons tore through his shields. The flagship shook violently. On the bridge, Kraval howled with rage. "This is not possible. They are only humans." Admiral Morgan's voice answered across the channel, calm and steady. "We are human, and we do not forget those who showed us kindness. You should have learned that before you raised your hand against them." Moments later, the resolute Dawn unleashed a final barrage. Kraval's flagship exploded in a burst of fire and light, scattering debris across the void. The Dominion fleet faltered, their command broken. One by one, they fled into hyperspace, retreating from a battle they had believed unwinnable. Silence fell over the skies of Seralis. Where once there had been only despair, now there was hope. The humans had not only fought for the Loranthi, they had saved them. In the capital, the council broadcast a message of gratitude. Loranthi across the world wept with joy, embracing their families, singing songs of survival. Children ran through the streets, pointing to the human ships above as if they were guardian stars. Elder Cyrilla, her old eyes shining with tears, spoke softly. "I knew they would come. I knew they would remember." In the human fleet, Admiral Morgan stood quietly as he looked down at the Loranthi world. His officers congratulated him on the victory, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He thought of the story of the Dauntless of Captain Adrian Holt, and of the Loranthi Captain Cyrilla, who had shown compassion when humanity was weak. Now, humanity had repaid the favor, but Morgan knew this was only the beginning. The Varuk would not accept this defeat quietly. The Dominion would return stronger and angrier, and when they did, humanity would stand ready, not just for themselves but for their allies. Because this was what it meant to be human, to remember, to repay, to fight not only for survival but for honor and gratitude. And in the hearts of the Loranthi, that truth would never be forgotten. The night after the battle, families gathered under the stars. For the first time in months, they looked upward without fear. The human ships glowed above them, guardians in the sky. One child asked her father, "Will the humans stay with us?" The father smiled softly. "I do not know. But I know this, they will never abandon us. Not now, not ever. We are part of their memory, and that makes us part of their story." The child nodded, her eyes shining. "Then maybe we will never be alone again." Thus ended the first great battle for Seralis. What had begun as despair had turned into hope. What had seemed like the end had become a new beginning. The Loranthi now understood a truth the galaxy would soon learn as well. When humans owed you a debt, they did not repay it with words. They repaid it with action, and when they did, the stars themselves trembled. This was not the end of the story. It was only the dawn of something greater. The galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Seralis, once under the shadow of destruction, now shone with hope. Yet above its lands, human fleets and Varuk remnants faced each other, preparing for a battle that would decide more than just the fate of one small world. For the Loranthi, every passing moment was a mixture of awe and fear. The humans had saved them once, but they had not fought the Dominion in full strength yet. Their cities were protected, but the enemy had not completely surrendered. The sky still vibrated with the distant hum of war engines. Elder Cirilla watched from the council chamber with unsteady hands. Beside her, young soldiers and civilians alike were guided by humans who trained them quickly in basic defense tactics. Even in their relief, the Loranthi understood the danger was far from over. "This is only the beginning," Cirilla whispered. "The Dominion will return, and we must be ready." Across orbit, Admiral Elias Morgan surveyed the battlefield from the bridge of the flagship Resolute Dawn. His silver hair shone under the lights of the command deck, and his calm eyes studied the enemy positions. "We must secure the system completely," he said to his officers. "Do not allow a single Dominion ship to escape or regroup. Protect the Loranthi people at all costs, and remember, their survival is why we are here." "Yes, Admiral," the crew responded in unison. Every human soldier knew the story. Every pilot, technician, and officer remembered the dauntless and the kindness of the Loranthi. That memory drove them forward, gave them courage, and guided every decision. This was no ordinary fight. It was repayment, honor, and loyalty all combined. The Varrock remnants, led by Warlord Kraval's surviving commanders, attempted a desperate counterattack. Their fleet, though diminished, still outnumbered the Loranthi ships by 10-1. They charged forward with the intent to destroy any remaining defenses and capture key cities. The humans responded with strategies the Varrock had never encountered. Squadrons weaved between planets and moons, creating confusing formations. Battleships fired in unpredictable patterns, using speed and precision to minimize risk while maximizing impact. Every Varrock attack was met with counterattacks that seemed impossible to anticipate. In one sudden maneuver, human frigates drew a Varrock squadron toward a gravity well near Soralis's largest moon. The Dominion ships, unprepared for the tactic, were trapped in the pull of the moon's gravity. Human bombers released from carriers above struck the vulnerable ships with surgical precision. A Loranthi officer standing near Cirilla watched the attack on the monitor. His jaw dropped. "They are unstoppable," he said quietly. Cirilla's eyes glimmered with pride. "They fight not for power," she said, "but for honor." On the surface of Soralis, the humans worked alongside the Loranthi people. They repaired homes, reinforced structures, and taught emergency evacuation methods. They guided civilians to safe zones and coordinated supply drops to the towns and villages still under threat. Young Loranthi fighters trained under human instructors. They learned how to handle simple weapons, how to communicate under fire, and most importantly, how to act with courage in the face of fear. Human soldiers shared stories of battles fought across the stars, not as boasting, but as lessons. The Loranthi absorbed every word. One young Loranthi girl named Kira approached a human pilot during a brief lull. She watched him clean his armor, his eyes thoughtful. "Why do you fight so hard for us?" she asked. The pilot smiled softly, brushing dust from his uniform. "Because your people helped ours when we had nothing. Humanity never forgets kindness, and now we repay it. That is all that matters." Kira stared at him, the weight of history filling her small heart. She felt hope rise like a sunrise, bright and steady. Above Soralis, the battle reached its peak. Human ships surrounded the Varrock fleet on multiple fronts. They used coordinated attacks that combined speed, agility, and firepower. One group of human frigates acted as decoys, drawing enemy fire while the main fleet delivered devastating strikes. Another squadron cut off the Dominion's retreat routes through hyperspace corridors. Kraval's commanders were stunned. They had never faced opponents who fought with both skill and selfless resolve. Every attack was precise, every sacrifice meaningful. They began to realize that these humans were not just soldiers. They were an unstoppable force fueled by memory, loyalty, and gratitude. Kraval's frustration became visible on his screen. His voice, once booming with confidence, cracked as he ordered desperate strikes. "Destroy them all. I will not lose to humans." But the humans had already predicted his moves. Using strategies built on centuries of experience and advanced technology, they countered each assault. One by one, Dominion ships were disabled or destroyed. Their forces scattered. On the ground, Loranthi volunteers joined in small ways. They guided evacuees, manned observation posts, and provided vital information to the human commanders. Although they were not trained warriors, their knowledge of the terrain and star systems proved invaluable. Humans combined this knowledge with advanced technology to create defenses that the Varrock could not overcome. Elder Cirilla observed the coordinated effort, her old heart swelling with admiration. Humans and Loranthi working together formed a bond stronger than she had ever imagined. This is what I hoped for, she murmured. Not just survival, but unity. The battle continued for hours, turning into a relentless struggle of tactics and endurance. Human engineers repaired damaged ships in real time, keeping them in the fight. Human medics treated both human and Loranthi casualties with equal care, moving under fire to save lives. Pilots performed maneuvers that seemed impossible, weaving through enemy fire to strike critical targets. Craval's fleet dwindled. His remaining ships fled into the void, pursued by human destroyers. The Dominion's morale collapsed. Even the most loyal Varrock soldiers began to retreat, realizing that the humans were more than what their history had predicted. The skies over Seralis, once filled with smoke and fire, slowly cleared. Human ships hovered protectively above the planet, their sensors scanning for any remaining threats. On the surface, Loranthi citizens emerged from shelters, their eyes wide with awe and relief. That night, for the first time in months, the skies were quiet. Families lit small fires celebrating survival. Soldiers cleaned their weapons and shared quiet stories. Children ran through the streets, laughing and pointing at the human ships above. The humans themselves moved among the Loranthi, distributing food, repairing buildings, and offering comfort. Elder Cirilla walked through the streets, observing the scene. She stopped by a group of children, including Kira, who waved at her excitedly. "They saved us," Kira said simply, her eyes shining. Cirilla nodded. "Yes, they did. They came for us and they fought for us, because they remember." The words were soft yet carried the weight of centuries. The Loranthi were no longer just survivors. They were protected, honored, and remembered. In the aftermath of the battle, Admiral Morgan addressed the human crews. His voice echoed across the ships. "This is more than a victory," he said. "We fought not for conquest, not for glory, but because a promise made long ago must be honored. The Loranthi helped us when we were weak. Today we repaid that debt. Let this be a lesson to all who underestimate humanity. We never forget, and when we repay, the universe itself feels the consequences." The crews cheered, but the words were more than celebration. They were a declaration. Humanity had arrived, not as conquerors, but as allies. Their presence was a warning. Kindness would not go unnoticed, and debts of honor would always be repaid. Across Seralis, life slowly began to return to normal. Human engineers assisted in rebuilding cities. Farmers returned to their fields, guided by human knowledge of crop protection and irrigation techniques. Scientists and scholars shared ideas with the Loranthi, introducing methods and technologies that would strengthen their world for generations. The Loranthi began to understand something profound. The memory of a single act of kindness could travel across time and space, shaping the future in ways they could never have imagined. Their people had once saved strangers without expecting reward. Now those strangers had returned in force to save them, not just with weapons, but with loyalty, strategy, and wisdom. As the sun rose over Seralis the next morning, the Loranthi looked to the sky. Human ships remained in orbit, a protective shield over their world. Elder Cirilla stood outside her home, breathing deeply. For centuries she had lived with quiet hope. Now she saw the living proof of that hope. "They remembered," she whispered to herself. "They truly remembered." Kira ran up to her, eyes bright. "Will they stay forever?" she asked. Cirilla smiled. "I do not know if they will stay forever, but I know this. They will never forget us, and that will change everything." And above, the stars seemed to shine brighter. Humanity had fought, and they had repaid a debt that had waited centuries. The battle of repayment was over, but the story of loyalty, gratitude, and honor was only beginning. The battle for Seralis was over. The Varrock Dominion had retreated into the darkness of space, their ships scattered and broken. Humanity's fleets remained in orbit, a protective shield around the Loranthi homeworld. For the first time in generations, the Loranthi people felt safety, not just temporary but lasting, as long as humans remained near. Elder Cirilla walked through the streets of the capital, observing her people. Children played in the sunlight, soldiers trained calmly under human supervision, and citizens repaired buildings damaged in the war. The city was alive again, filled with laughter, hope, and determination. Yet Cirilla knew that this was more than a victory of arms. It was the fulfillment of a promise, a debt of kindness repaid. For centuries, the Loranthi had thought their small act of helping the stranded human crew was forgotten, but humanity had remembered, and the scale of their repayment was beyond imagination. On the human flagship Resolute Dawn, Admiral Elias Morgan convened a council with his senior officers. While the immediate threat of the Varrock was over, Morgan knew their work was far from complete. The Dominion would return and the Loranthi must be prepared. "We did not fight just to save lives," Morgan said, looking at his officers. "We fought to honor a promise. But promises are not enough if the people we protect cannot defend themselves. We will strengthen Seralis, share technology, and ensure that this world is never vulnerable again." "Yes, Admiral," responded Captain Rhea Lorne, his second in command. "The Loranthi deserve more than temporary protection. They need allies, knowledge, and strength." Morgan nodded. "Prepare the plans. We will offer them every tool they need. Not as rulers, not as conquerors, but as friends. That is what repayment looks like." The first step in this repayment was rebuilding. Human engineers worked tirelessly alongside Loranthi architects. They repaired cities, restored power grids, and reconstructed spaceports. Entire fleets of human ships provided supplies and technology that the Loranthi had never seen before. Hospitals were equipped with advanced medical technology, and schools received knowledge databases that had once been inaccessible. The Loranthi were amazed. They had expected aid for survival, but humanity offered them something far greater, a chance to thrive. Cirilla visited one of the newly rebuilt schools, observing children learning with human teachers. She saw the same curiosity she had once witnessed in humans centuries ago. She realized that kindness once given could grow across generations, transforming the weak into something resilient and hopeful. Meanwhile, Admiral Morgan and his officers met with the Loranthi Council to discuss defense and diplomacy. For the first time, the Loranthi had allies willing to train their military, strengthen their fleets, and protect their borders. "You must understand," Morgan said, "we do not fight for domination. We fight to ensure that you are never helpless again. You helped us when we were weak. Now you will never have to face danger alone." The council, initially hesitant, felt a surge of gratitude. This was more than assistance. It was respect. The humans treated them as equals, honoring their history, their choices, and their people. Cirilla spoke quietly at the meeting. "Your arrival saved us, but your guidance ensures our future. We cannot thank you enough." Morgan's response was simple. "No thanks needed. Only that you remember. And when your people have the chance, you help others as we helped you." That is how the cycle continues. The human presence also changed the Loranthi perspective on the galaxy. For generations, they had believed they were insignificant, too small to matter in the vast expanse of stars. Now they realized that even small actions could echo across centuries. Their kindness to humans had changed the course of history. And now, with humans by their side, their place in the galaxy was secure. Young Kira watched human pilots practicing maneuvers in the sky. She asked her mother, "Will the humans stay with us forever?" Her mother smiled. "Perhaps not forever, but always when we need them most. They remember, and their memory protects us." Kira nodded, understanding that loyalty and gratitude could be stronger than armies or weapons. While most humans were content to help and train, some went further. They began sharing their knowledge of star systems, trade routes, and interstellar diplomacy. Loranthi diplomats learned the subtleties of negotiation with other species. Their leaders studied human strategies for peace and defense. Slowly, Seralis transformed from a quiet, fearful world into a confident participant in galactic affairs. For the first time, the Loranthi saw a future where they could speak without fear, trade without worry, and defend themselves if danger arose. Their small act of kindness centuries earlier had led to a new era of prosperity, safety, and respect. The most astonishing part of humanity's repayment, however, came not from technology or strategy, but from trust. Admiral Morgan offered the Loranthi a permanent seat in human diplomatic councils. He provided long-term security agreements that would ensure the Loranthi never face conquest alone. "You will have your voice in decisions that affect this sector," Morgan said. "Your people will be respected and protected. We do this because you once saved lives when it was dangerous for you to act. That is a debt we do not forget." The Loranthi Council was speechless. They had not expected such honor, such recognition. They had thought repayment would be limited to survival or temporary aid. Instead, humanity had offered them partnership, equality, and future security. Meanwhile, the Varrock Dominion, licking their wounds in distant space, struggled to comprehend the humans' actions. They had assumed that a small, weak species like the Loranthi could be crushed without consequence. Yet the humans had not only destroyed the Dominion fleet, they had reshaped the political balance of the sector. Rumors spread quickly. Humans never forget. If you owe them, you will see it returned 100-fold. And if you betray them, beware the consequences. The galaxy began to understand that human loyalty and gratitude were forces as powerful as any fleet or weapon. Even the smallest kindness could echo across centuries. And when humanity repaid it, the effect was shocking. Back on Seralis, life settled into a new rhythm. Farmers tended their fields with improved tools and knowledge. Engineers repaired ships and expanded transport systems. Students studied human mathematics, sciences, and strategies. The Loranthi were no longer just survivors. They were thriving, protected, and respected. The humans, while eventually returning to their own colonies, left permanent stations for training, research, and diplomacy. They promised to return whenever their allies were in danger, making clear that the bond forged on Seralis was not temporary, but enduring. Elder Cirilla walked through the capital one evening, observing the bustling city and the peaceful skies above. She stopped in a quiet square and looked up, remembering the young human crew she had saved centuries ago. She whispered softly, "You kept your promise," and in her heart, she knew that humanity's repayment was not just physical protection, it was trust, honor, and the gift of possibility. The story of the Loranthi and the humans spread quickly throughout the sector. Other species began to speak of it in awe, teaching their young that even the smallest acts of kindness could ripple across time. The phrase "humans never forget" became a lesson taught in schools, spoken in council chambers, and whispered in markets. The galaxy had learned that gratitude could be more powerful than armies, that memory could shape the future, and that those who repay kindness might change the balance of power. Kira, now older, stood on a cliff overlooking the city. Human ships shimmered in orbit above, gleaming like protective stars. She remembered the stories Elder Cirilla had told her, the legends of a distant time when humans had been fragile, when the Loranthi had offered shelter to strangers. Now, she understood the truth. Kindness was a gift that could never be erased, and humanity's repayment had transformed not only her world, but the future of her people. She whispered to the stars, "We will never forget either. And when we can, we will help others just as you helped us." Above, the stars seemed to shine brighter. The galaxy was quiet, but the echoes of gratitude traveled far and wide. Humanity had repaid a debt, and the result was nothing short of legendary. The Loranthi were safe, thriving, and honored. The Varrock Dominion had learned that underestimating humans was a dangerous mistake, and the universe itself had witnessed the power of memory, loyalty, and honor. The story of Seralis became a legend told across generations. Humanity doesn't forget a favor, and when they repay it, the galaxy watches in awe. And so the Loranthi people looked to the future with hope. Their past act of kindness had changed everything. Humanity had shown that even the smallest gestures could ripple across centuries, and that repayment could come in ways far beyond imagination. For the Loranthi, and for the galaxy, one truth remained eternal. When humans remember, the impossible becomes real, and when they repay, the universe itself feels it. The stars, silent witnesses to this tale, glimmered with the promise of new beginnings. The story of loyalty, courage, and shocking repayment would be told for centuries to come. And for those who understood its meaning, one lesson was clear.